welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into some fascinating sources you shared.
Yeah, we're diving headfirst into the world of Horace, the Roman critic.
That's right, using that YouTube transcript as our starting point.
Yeah.
His ideas, well, they still really resonate, don't they?
They absolutely do. It's quite remarkable how relevant they remain.
Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. Horace, he was active during the Augustan age in Rome. And what's really striking, I think, is how important poets were culturally back then, maybe even more so than philosophers, which, feels different from Greece with Plato and Aristotle.
That's a great point. It really was a sort of shift in focus. In Greece, you had Plato and Aristotle. Philosophy was arguably, top of the intellectual pyramid.
Right.
But in Augustan Rome, it seems like poets and their art really took center stage culturally. It's a fascinating flip.
And patronage played a big role in that, didn't it? This idea of wealthy patrons supporting artists.
Oh, definitely. Patronage was crucial. Horace benefited, Ovid too. It gave writers the freedom, the resources to actually do their work.
Allowed them to focus on the craft.
Exactly. It fostered a really rich literary environment, though maybe not always simple, politically speaking.
Sure. So our mission today, let's say, is to really get a handle on Horace's contribution to literary criticism. What did he bring to the table?
And the key text for that is his Ars Poetica, the art of poetry.
Right, but it's not like a dry textbook, is it? It's described as an epistle.
Yeah, basically a formal letter, but it's elegant, it's instructive, didactic is the term, and importantly, it's written as a dialogue.
Ah, dialogue form. That's interesting, like a conversation exploring ideas.
Precisely. It suggests he's working through these concepts, maybe presenting different angles, not just handing down rules.
It makes me think of John Dryden's essay on dramatic poesy. The transcript mentions that too, using dialogue.
That's a really good connection. Both use that conversational structure to delve into literary theory. It invites the reader into the debate, almost.
Okay, so let's get to the core. What was Horace really saying about poetry? What's its main job?
Well, his most famous idea, the central one, is that great poetry must do two things: delight and instruct.
Delight and instruct, okay.
You can use the mnemonic DIA, delight, instruct, audience. It has to hit both notes for the people reading or listening.
Right, DIA. So delight, that seems straightforward enough. Pleasure, entertainment.
Exactly. It needs to be enjoyable, engaging, not a slog to get through. It should give pleasure.
And then instruct. So it also needs to teach something, offer wisdom, maybe moral guidance.
Precisely. It shouldn't just be fluff. It needs substance, something that educates or offers insight. But it's not just ticking boxes.
What do you mean?
Well, Horace implies they work together, The delight makes the instruction stick, makes it more appealing, and the instruction gives the delight more weight, more purpose than just momentary fun.
Ah, I see. A kind of synergy between them. And this whole idea that poetry has a purpose that connects to the bigger debate the transcript mentions with Plato and Aristotle, right?
Absolutely. It fits right into that long-standing discussion about what art is for.
So let's start with Plato. What was his take? He wasn't a fan, was he?
Not really, no. Plato famously saw poetry as a copy of a copy.
A copy of a copy.
Yeah, he believed the physical world was just an imperfect shadow of the true reality, the world of ideal forms. Poetry, then, is just imitating our world. So it's twice removed from truth.
Wow. So like a really bad photocopy, basically disconnected from reality.
Pretty much. He thought it was metaphysically unsound, irrational even, not useful for society. And he had moral objections, too.
Moral ones? Like what?
He worried poetry stirred up base emotions, irrational passions in people, made them less controlled, less reasonable.
So potentially harmful, actually. A bad influence.
Yes, that was his concern. Bad for the individual soul, bad for the stability of his ideal state, which led him to, well, his famous conclusion in the Republic. Banish the poets. Get them out of the ideal city.
Seriously. Just kick them out. That's harsh.
It's a pretty extreme take, yeah.
Okay, so Plato's out on poetry, but Aristotle, his student, he pushed back, didn't he?
He did. In his Poetics, he tackles Plato's ideas head-on. He agrees poetry is imitation mimesis in Greek, but he argues it's a creative copy.
Creative.
Yeah.
So not just passive reflection. There's artistry involved.
Exactly. There's skill, interpretation. It's not just holding up a mirror. Aristotle saw real value in poetry, a contribution to society, even a moral function, in a way.
Okay, and that leads to his definition of tragedy, doesn't it?
Yes, a very influential definition. Tragedy is the imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude, using, poetic language, performed dramatically.
And achieving. There's a key part at the end.
Right, achieving the proper purgation or catharsis of emotions like pity and fear.
Catharsis, that's the word. What did he mean by that exactly? Purgation.
He meant a kind of emotional cleansing or release for the audience. Witnessing these intense emotions in a controlled, artistic setting allows the audience to process them, understand them, and be sort of purified by the experience. It's psychological.
So where Plato saw poetry dangerously stirring things up, Aristotle saw it as a healthy release valve.
That's a good way to put it, a fundamental difference in perspective on the power of art.
Okay, so we have Plato banning poets, Aristotle defending poetry's value through catharsis. Where does Horace fit back in?
Horace comes later, in Rome. He knows these Greek ideas, for sure. His delight and instruct feels like, well, maybe a pragmatic Roman middle ground.
How so?
It acknowledges poetry should have substance, like Aristotle might agree, but maybe less strictly philosophical than Plato demanded. And it fully embraces the pleasure aspect. It needs to be enjoyable and useful.
Finding that balance. Okay. Now, the transcript also mentions Horace getting into the nitty-gritty, the technical side of things, and the critic's role.
Yes, he really stressed technical perfection, craftsmanship. It wasn't enough to just have feelings or ideas. You had to execute them skillfully. Word choice, structure, meter, it all mattered.
So inspiration needs perspiration, basically. You need the skill to shape the art.
Precisely. And that's where the critic comes in. For Horace, the sensible critic's job is to point out the flaws, the drawbacks, constructive criticism.
Okay, what kind of flaws was he looking for? The transcript listed some specific things.
Right, he mentions 4 harsh words.
Like rough-sounding language.
Yeah, unpleasant phrasing. Then ugly lines, meaning clunky or awkward verses, obscure passages.
Things that are hard to understand, confusing.
Exactly. And finally, defective phrases, so grammatical mistakes or imprecise language. It's all about clarity, elegance, and precision.
Makes sense. You want the poem to flow, to be clear, well made.
Yeah.
Anything jarring takes the reader out of it. What about length? Did he say poems should be short?
He advocated for brevity, yeah. Not necessarily a specific line count, but the sense that a poem shouldn't outstay its welcome. No padding. Be concise, be effective, get to the point beautifully.
Brevity is the soul of wit, as someone else said later.
Kind of captures the spirit, yes.
Now here's a really interesting bit from the transcript. Horace's idea of plausibility. What's that about?
Plausibility, for Horace, meant seeming reasonable or probable within the world of the poem.
Okay, so even if it's fantasy, it needs its own internal logic. It has to feel believable on its own terms.
Exactly that. It needs internal consistency, which leads to that seemingly paradoxical phrase.
Probable improbabilities or possible impossibilities. That sounds like a brain teaser.
It does, doesn't it? But unpack it a bit. What he seems to mean is that poets should write about things that are, maybe impossible in the real world, but make them seem believable, probable within the poem's reality.
Okay, but how?
Well, one way to think about it, and this connects to later ideas, is that the poet takes familiar things, everyday things, and describes them in a way that makes them seem strange, unfamiliar, new.
Thinking the familiar strange.
Yes. The transcript uses examples like trees, hills, mountains. We see them all the time. But the poet uses language to make us see them again, as if for the first time. Makes them wondrous.
So it's about perspective. Using words to shift how we see ordinary reality.
Precisely. It's revealing the strangeness hidden in the familiar. That's the improbability, the strangeness made probable or believable through art.
That's a powerful idea. Making us look again at the world.
It really is, and it's an idea with long legs, apparently.
How so? The transcript connects this to later thinkers, right?
Yeah, fascinatingly. It brings up Samuel Taylor Coleridge first.
A romantic poet.
Right. And Coleridge talked about poetry transforming mere objects of reality into strange things to arouse feelings of wonder, amaze, and interest. That sounds a lot like Horace's idea, doesn't it?
It really does. Making reality strange to evoke wonder. And Coleridge had a term for the mental faculty that does this.
He did. Secondary imagination. He described it as an active, artistic power that dissolves, diffuses, dissipates in order to recreate reality. It breaks down our habitual ways of seeing to build something new and unfamiliar.
So it's an active reshaping of reality through imagination, not just passive copying.
Exactly. And then jumping forward again, the transcript mentions the Russian formalist critic Victor Shklovsky.
And his concept of Defamiliarization.
Defamiliarization, yes. From his essay Art as Technique, Shklovsky defined it explicitly as a literary technique, presenting familiar things in strange, unfamiliar ways.
Okay, so very similar again, but why? What was Shklovsky's point?
His argument was that we perceive most things automatically, habitually. We don't really see them. Defamiliarization, he said, is art's way of fighting that automatic perception.
How does it fight it?
By making the familiar seem strange, it forces us to slow down, to actually look, to engage consciously with the object or idea being presented. It makes the stone stony, as he famously put it.
Makes the stone stony. So it makes us feel the quality of the thing again, instead of just recognizing the label stone.
Exactly. It shocks us out of autopilot. Think about that tree example again. Describe it weirdly, and suddenly we're not just thinking tree, we're actually considering its form, its texture, its presence in a new way.
So the end goal is deeper engagement to prevent that automatic skim reading of reality.
That's the idea, to make us perceive things intensely, consciously. And it's amazing to see this thread running from Horace's probable improbabilities through Coleridge's imagination right up to Shklovsky's defamiliarization.
It really shows the lasting power of that core insight, doesn't it? How art messes with our perception in useful ways.
Absolutely. It highlights how Horace wasn't just writing a how-to guide. He was tapping into something fundamental about how literature works on us.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping this up, it's been quite the journey through Horace. We've hit his big idea, delight and instruct.
The DIA.
We saw how that fits between Plato's rejection and Aristotle's defense of poetry.
Right, the whole debate about art's purpose.
Then we got into his focus on technical skill, the critic's job of finding flaws, harsh words, ugly lines.
Obscurity, defective phrases, the nuts and bolts of good writing.
And finally, that really intriguing concept of plausibility, making the familiar strange, the probable improbabilities.
Which connects so clearly to Coleridge and Shklovsky centuries later. Defamiliarization.
It really hammers home how poetry can reshape how we see everything.
It really does. Which leads to maybe a final thought for our listeners to chew on.
Go for it.
Think about something totally ordinary around you right now. Your desk, a cup, a tree outside. How could you describe it just using words to make someone else see it like they've never seen it before?
Make it strange, make it new.
Yeah. What does trying to do that tell you about how language works? About perspective. It's tapping into that power Horace was exploring all those years ago, something to ponder.